Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about what a good plaintiff's lawyer looks for in a client and hopefully give you some insight into how plaintiff's lawyers make their decisions. I'll have more on that in just a moment. So I want to make sure I'm being clear here. We're talking about good plaintiff's lawyers, the people who are honorable, the people who understand the profession and who understand what their ethical obligations are. These are people who do really good work. They usually get really good results. And the reason they do that is because they're good, ethical, qualified lawyers. So what do they look for in a client when they're looking to represent a personal injury client? The first thing they look for is a huggable client. What does that mean? Well, it means you need to be someone who is approachable, who comes off as somebody that someone would like to do something nice for. Now, a lot of times people suffer traumas in their lives and they get angry. I understand that. That's perfectly okay. It is perfectly okay to be angry for a while. But when you go to seek relief in the courts, if you come across to jurors as angry or hateful, you turn people off and you don't get a good result. So we look for people who are huggable. Now, let's talk a little bit about how you overcome that issue with anger, right? In 2001, shortly before the towers fell, our firm was involved in a case against Robert Courtney. Robert Courtney was a Kansas City area pharmacist who, for whatever reason, basically I think to make more money, decided that instead of giving a full dose of Gemzar, which was about $2,000 a dose, he would water down the Gemzar and give them about 1% of the dose, and he would spread that 1%, that solution, over 10 or 15 patients. So instead of getting a big dose or correct dose of Gemzar to fight things like lung cancer and other various forms of cancer, breast cancer, these folks got a very diluted quantity. And it's really awful. They came out of there feeling good. It's like, wow, this is great. Chemotherapy is supposed to make me sick, but I'm not sick. They thought of it as a feature. It was a bug. And unfortunately, it wasn't discovered until much, much later when a doctor, I should say, who was an oncologist, blew the whistle on the pharmacist and the FBI got involved. I remember one of those ladies that I represented and I interviewed, and she had every right in the world to be angry, but she wasn't. She was sad, she was disappointed, and she just wanted to make sure that this was never going to happen to someone else. And that's why she sought legal counsel. And that is the kind of attitude I think that plaintiffs' lawyers respect. People who are not just in it for the money. If the first thing you do when you come through the door at the lawyer's office is say, how much money is this case worth? You're not going to like the answer, because the answer is probably going to be, well, that depends on a number of factors. And it does. But you've also probably indicated to the plaintiff's attorney at that point that you're all about the money, and it is unlikely, unless he's all about the money, that he's going to be interested in taking your case. So the first item is a huggable client who's in it for the right reasons. The second thing that's necessary is a horrible result. Whether it's medical negligence or a traffic accident or anything else, the result has to be horrible, either death or very, very serious injury. And that's often a terrible thing to say, that, you're looking for people who've been injured in this way. But jurors do not tend to give large amount of money to people who, for whatever reason, are not seriously injured. They view the courts, and rightly so, as a place where people get relief for serious issues. So you need to have significant damages. What are damages? Damages are of two kinds. There are economic damages, which are things you can replace with a checkbook, medical costs, for example. And there are non-economic damages, pain, suffering, disability, disfigurement, loss of enjoyment of life. Non-economic damages in most jurisdictions are capped, and the damages have to be sufficient to outweigh the cash outlay on the part of the attorney. In other words, they are not just in it for the money. They want to help you. But unfortunately, it costs a lot of money to do that. In a typical medical negligence case, by the time you go from filing the case to trial, the plaintiff's attorney will probably have spent somewhere in the area of $75,000 on your case. Now, $75,000 is a lot of money. And in order to make it so that you have something to take home and he has something to claim as a fee, he has to have injuries that are sufficient to do that. Now, sometimes that is the art of the lawyer, to take what appears to be a relatively insignificant injury and make it seem bigger than it is. And you can do that through argument and rhetoric, but what you can't do is lie. Lawyers are not allowed to lie. They're not allowed to let you lie, which leads us to the next quality that a lawyer is going to look for in a client, which is truthfulness. You have to have someone who tells the truth all the time. Now, how does this issue rear its head? The way it rears its head is that it has been my experience that people do not live a blameless life. People get traffic tickets. People have car accidents. People run red lights. And sometimes people get divorces. They commit adultery. And nobody likes to admit that they have done these things. I understand that. But when the lawyer asks you about convictions, you need to be specific and accurate and tell the lawyer what's in your past. It is unlikely to have a direct effect on his decision to take your case. So let me give a little example of that. Early on in my career, we had a gentleman come in, and he had the worst case of malpractice I had seen up to that point. He had a little spot on his little finger that was a brown spot, and he was concerned about it. He went to the doctor one year, and the doctor says, it's probably just a blood blister. Don't worry about it. He came back the next year. That blood blister hasn't gone away, but, sometimes it takes a while. It wasn't a blood blister. It was melanoma, and by the time it was biopsied and diagnosed, he had terminal disease, and he was going to die. So he came in for an interview. We talked. One of the things that we routinely get is Social Security numbers, because we're going to have to request tax records from the IRS. You cannot establish damages, particularly for someone who's self-employed, if you don't show what they have reported to the government. And this particular gentleman said, well, I'm self-employed and I just don't report anything to the government. So we said, okay, no problem. We will help you file back taxes because we're pretty sure we're going to get them back. And so when he came in for his second interview, I got ready to do that, and I asked him for his Social Security number again, and he gave me a different Social Security number. And that raised my suspicions, so I called a service that we used, a background investigation service, gave him the name and the two Social Security numbers, and asked him to run it. I went to lunch, and when I came back, the secretary said, guess what? The FBI is calling for you. It turns out that guy was basically a truck hijacker. He told me he sold stuff that he bought from QVC at a discounted price at flea markets. Well, he sold stuff at flea markets, but the discount that he obtained was a 10-finger discount off the back of a truck. And so We had to dismiss his case. We couldn't help him at that point. And it was a real shame because I felt bad for his family. But in that situation, if he was going to lie about something like that, he would lie about other things, including when he went to see the doctor. So we determined that we didn't wish to continue representing him, and we fired him as a client. Truthfulness is a very important quality in clients. And finally, the last factor that we look for is a careful client. In other words, somebody who is going to act consistently with what they claim. This sort of revolves around truthfulness, but not completely. Nobody likes to admit that they are disabled. And unfortunately, there are people who are scammers, and scammers make it bad for everybody. And as a result, sometimes insurance companies hire private investigators, and private investigators will go and they will find where that person lives. And let's say they're claiming a back injury. They will put a concrete block behind the tires of the client. And then when the client comes out, they are on video. And they've got this concrete block behind their tire. And so even though they have a back injury and it hurts, they bend down and move that block so that they can get out. A careful client recognizes that everybody's eyes are on them from the moment they walk out of that lawyer's office till the moment they walk out of the courtroom with a verdict. And as a result, when something like that happens, they have to call a friend, a neighbor, somebody to help them out. And it's very rare when people do that, but that is the kind of client that really shines in our view. So hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully it tells you a little bit about what our thought process is. I want to say one last thing. I know there are people who watch this channel who have probably been sued. They've probably been sued for money. They may actually have had a recovery against them, or their insurance company may have paid the claim. I myself had that happen to me. I was involved in a traffic accident. It was not my fault. The person slammed on their brakes in front of me for no reason, and I hit them. And of course, they claimed thousands of dollars in damages. I wanted to take it to trial. The insurance company said it's not worth it, and they paid the woman money. Now, I'm offended by that as an attorney. I'm offended by that because you shouldn't bring a claim that's frivolous. And I have never brought a claim that was frivolous. I was asked to bring a claim that was frivolous once by a supervising attorney who told me that because the damages were so high, we ought to be able to fish around and find a theory of liability. That's not how I operate. I told them that, and as a result, I got fired. Best day of my life. Best day of my life, even though it didn't seem like it at the time. Because I held my head up, I walked out of that office, and I've been proud of that ever since. So, a little bit on me, a little bit on what clients are, what you should do as a client when you go see a plaintiff's personal injury firm. And I hope that's helpful, and I hope you understand if you have been sued. I understand, I sympathize with you, I get what you've gone through, and I appreciate the fact that you may not like the idea that I'm telling people how to approach attorneys, but a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people wind up getting hurt as a result. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate all the comments I've gotten. If you have questions, leave them in the comments down below. I will do my best to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Have a terrific day.